Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest, Tran, who's here to share with us her new novel, Daughters of the New Year. So Tran's debut book was inspired by the author's need to reclaim her heritage and to understand her mother's world before she fled Vietnam for New Orleans. Tran is a Vietnamese American author with an MFA in creative writing from the University of Mississippi and a PhD in English and creative writing from Ohio University. Her fiction has been published in Joyland, Little Fiction, Territory, Complete Sentence, and her nonfiction writings have been published in the Harvard Review, Los Angeles Review of Books, New Ohio Review, and Thrillist. Tran's work has received many awards and was listed as a notable essay in the Best American Essay in 2018. So let's welcome to the show, Tran.
Thanks for having me, Marianne. Excited to be here.
Oh, my goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. It's getting such great reviews. What inspired you to write this?
This book is about a Vietnamese American family in New Orleans, and I am Vietnamese American and grew up in New Orleans. So a lot of the book is inspired by my experiences growing up and just what it was like being a part of an immigrant family in the U.S.
As you were developing this story, were there any important pieces that came from your family?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the book is structured around a family, and it follows Swan, the mother, and her three daughters, Track, Me, and True. And my family is similarly structured in that, of course, I have a mother and I have two older sisters. So I was really interested in studying the relationship between mothers and daughters, of course, but also thinking about birth order and thinking about what it was like for my older sisters to, grow up in a family that had really just moved to the US and versus what it was like for me as the youngest child. And so a lot of the things are made up or things that I had experienced, but the volume turned up to like 1,000. So for example, my mother was a beauty queen in Vietnam in 1973, and we had this really big trophy in our living room. And when I started writing the book, I was really interested in the pageant trophy and the idea of a pageant in Vietnam during wartime. And so that makes its way into the narrative of the book.
And I found that so striking, bringing that portion in. And Daughters of the New Year, what does that title mean?
Funnily enough, the book originally was titled something else. And then my editor asked if I would be open to renaming the book. And I was very, very attached to the original title, which was Dragon, Tiger, Goat, which is based on the zodiac signs of each of the characters. And I was like, okay, we can rename it, but it has to be something really good. So my editor was, honestly, I was like, I doubt she'll think of anything that's good enough. But she brought, the very first title she brought to me was Daughters of the New Year. And I thought that's really appropriate. It's appropriate because the mother is very obsessed with divining the fate of her daughters through the lunar zodiac, the Eastern zodiac. And it's very much based in, this idea that you can figure out what's going to happen, or you can protect your family based on, their signs and what year they were born. And so the daughters, of course, they strain against this. They want to be American girls. They don't care about the zodiac. So a major theme throughout the book is this kind of push and pull against traditional ways versus new ways. And so I thought that Daughters of the New Year was really an appropriate title to reflect that.
It's a fabulous title. It really catches you. When you were writing your book, was there a lot of research that you did for this?
Oh my gosh, yes. So actually the research was my favorite part of writing the book because I just, part of my motive in writing it was to get in touch with my culture and to understand, to be more empathetic towards the plight of people like my parents, refugees who flee war-torn countries. And so I was in a PhD program when I started writing it. So I had a lot of time to do research about Vietnamese history. And the narrative moves backwards in time. So, we start in pretty close to the present. And then as we move farther back, of course, there's less and less that I have personally experienced and more that I had to do research about. So, as we go backwards, we go into Vietnam, we go into the Vietnam War, we see colonial and pre-colonial Vietnam, and all that stuff. Of course, I haven't lived through, so I had to do a lot of research. And what was interesting was that, I'm in the US right now. So a lot of the research I was doing was newspaper clippings or, articles that had been written at the time. And it was all written from a US perspective. So I had to be I had to really imagine what it would be like from a Vietnamese perspective. So that was what a lot of the research was. And then as you go really, really far back, eventually we get to the perspectives of these woman warriors, Lady True and the Trung sisters, and they were also a part of the inspiration of the book. But there were these women warriors who have kind of risen to a level of national hero and become a little bit mythologized in Vietnam. And so I was interested in researching the Trung sisters and Lady True and understanding, how I could incorporate them into a lineage of womanhood in the book.
And you did that so masterfully, I've got to tell you. So
Thank you so much.
so well together. And we don't do spoilers, so we're gonna not dive into the topic too much. But when you were writing this book, did you feel like it changed you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I'm not a mother. I've only been a daughter. So, I was writing. I was writing from the perspectives of the daughters, but I also, the perspective shifts as you go through the story, and you meet. Swan is the main mother that you remain with in the beginning of the book, but then you meet grandmothers and great grandmothers and great great grandmothers, and so I really had to put myself in my own mother's shoes and understand some of the choices that she made. And, of course, when you're a kid, you don't understand why your parents are making certain decisions. And maybe you disagree with those decisions. But, putting myself in their shoes, especially in the difficult circumstances that they had to raise us in, really helped me to empathize with them and be more compassionate. So writing the book really forced me to see it from their perspective. And that definitely has changed the way that I view motherhood and raising kids.
When you were doing your research, was there anything that surprised you?
I don't know if surprise per se, but I was drawn in by some of the little side bits of history that I didn't even know existed. So for example, I was doing a lot of research about like the social elite in Vietnam during the Vietnam War and also during colonial Vietnam. And so I was doing some research about the places where the social elite hung out and what kinds of activities they did. And one of the things I discovered was a social club in Vietnam called the Cercle Sportif. And it was like a high-end recreational club. And I just got so drawn into the kind of politics of a space like that, and imagining what it was like to have a party there. They had a really big pool, the only pool I think that people really went to socialize at. And so they had a big ball there. And so that was really, really fun for me because, I think a lot of times when we think about Vietnam, immediately we go to ideas of war and violence and loss. But it was really cool to find spaces like that and imagine a life outside of war and what it might mean to, just be a person in Vietnam going to this fun ball at this really cool space. So it was stuff like that that really helped to reposition my perspective, and was surprising to me that, I got so drawn in, and it was really exciting to learn stuff like that.
What would you like our listeners and readers to take away from your book?
I hope that, my book aims to celebrate women, and it imagines an alternative narrative to a history that we might be familiar with. And there's a lot about my parents' lives that I'll never know or understand. And so this book is really a form of inquiry and exploration. And I hope that a reader goes into the book also learning something about womanhood and motherhood and just being a person in the world.
It's so important that we celebrate our women. And I think being able to investigate our own family stories is such a blessing when we can. Did you find that it was difficult to get a lot of the answers that maybe you were looking for the book?
Yeah, especially because so much of Vietnam is the history of it is mediated by other countries or other perspectives. I really wanted to imagine a history that celebrated Vietnamese women outside of these other perspectives. So that was kind of difficult because, everything that I've learned about Vietnam in the US really centers the US and its involvement. And of course, like that's natural because we're in the US. And if I'm learning US history, like it's the US is going to center itself. But, as a Vietnamese person, I wanted to think about that war and about the conflict in that country in a different way. And so it was a struggle at first to like recenter the way that I was thinking about it and looking for certain reading materials that viewed it in a different way. And then also just like asking my parents about stories from their childhood was at first it was difficult because I think that it's a very traumatic experience living through a war. And so I think it was very difficult for them at first to share their stories. But once they found out that I was writing the book, they were really excited about it. And they wanted to, make sure that their history was, that made their way into the writing somehow. So that was hard at first, but it turned out to be very fruitful.
Well, it's such a beautiful read. My goodness. And Ian, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Readers can find me at my website, elizabethmtran.com. And then you can also follow me on Twitter at etran3 or Instagram emtran3.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thanks for having me, Marianne.
Well, thank you, E.M. Tran. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new novel, Daughters of the New Year. Daughters of the New Year is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order. And of course, remember to support our indie bookstores. On that note, we're going to pause here for a quick moment, and we'll be right back after these messages. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.